Wars only, I don't know what the fuck your problem is.
What's up guys, Star Wars Only here, and today we're going to talk about, is The Force Awakens in the same position as the prequels? And what I mean by that is it being received exactly as the prequels were back in 1999, what was it, 2002 and 2005? So, The Force Awakens came out, and actually let's go back to the prequels on it. The prequels came out in 1999, it started in 2002, and then 2005, the other two came out. And at first, with The Phantom Menace, I believe you can watch a movie called The People vs. George Lucas. It explains how at first people were like, wow, this movie's really good, and you can even watch the interviews from the time. Everybody was like, oh my god, this movie can't be bad, you know, it's coming out, it's Star Wars, it's gotta be great. And then it came out and people were like, yeah, it's great. And then over time, people suddenly go, yeah, it really wasn't that good. And he even talks about how there's some people who, when they first saw it, were like, wow, this actually kind of sucks. And it's kind of a thing, and I would say not in the pop culture, but in basically the universe and the world that we live in, people have noticed that the prequels really aren't that good. And it was even in that movie FANBOYS, the Star Wars fan movie basically, and it's really, really good actually. I highly recommend you watch that. Even in that movie, at the end, they realize, hey, this movie sucks. So it's always been kind of like a punchline of jokes and just how life is, that people notice that the prequels really aren't that good compared to the original trilogy. But this wasn't the case when it first came out in 1999. Even in 2002, it was kind of like, not that good. And I believe in 2002, The Attack of the Clones was the only movie, the only Star Wars movie to date to not be like the bestseller of the year. If I recall correctly, that was the only movie that wasn't the bestseller. And to be fair, that is probably the worst Star Wars movie of all time. I know a lot of people say The Phantom Menace is far worse. I actually can watch The Phantom Menace and enjoy it. I cannot enjoy anything about Attack of the Clones, but that's another story itself. So, is The Force Awakens in the same boat? And what I mean is, if you look at The Force Awakens when it first came out, I mean like a day or two prior, because I remember this perfectly because I was plenty old enough to remember this. Before it came out, everybody was like, alright, this is going to be great, Star Wars is back, and it looks great because it's got a lot of nostalgia. That's the reason this movie was looking so good, because it had a lot of nostalgia. Han Solo and Chewbacca are back, Princess Leia is back, you know, all this stuff. You see Darth Vader's mask, stuff like that made a lot of people want to come back. And so you come out and you see The Force Awakens and you look at the reviews, you see that it was like 97% positive on Rotten Tomatoes, and IMDb had it like 9.9. Everything was so positive about this movie before it officially released for everybody else around the world on December 17th, I believe it was. It looked so great. Everyone was like, wow, this movie's amazing. And then you go and you watch it and a lot of people are like, oh my god, this movie's great. I remember watching it for the first time and going, wow, wait, what the fuck? This is really familiar. Like, I remember being disappointed from the opening crawls. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I actually like it a lot better than the prequels. But I remember watching the opening crawl going, fucking Luke's gone? God damn it! Again? What the hell? And so that pissed me off. And then, like, as the movie went on, like, I suddenly kind of, like, slowly got a little more disappointed. And I specifically remember in the trench run that they did on Starkiller Base, I was like, wow, this is very close to A New Hope. Like, holy shit. But I didn't mind it, and the reason I don't mind The Force Awakens is because, you know, people complain, oh, it's too much like the original Star Wars, and I'm like, well, that's why I like it, because it's exactly like the original Star Wars. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's a solid movie. And so I watched The Force Awakens maybe 5 to 10 times, not too much, but not too little either, I guess. And so my point is, a lot of people have realized that this movie isn't as good as it seemed to be when it came out. And the reason for it being is that people started realizing, hey, this is exactly like A New Hope. And people have made YouTube videos constantly of, oh, this is the worst Star Wars movie, it's a horrible movie. There's like a video called like Why It's a Massive Failure or Massive Disappointment, and all this stuff bashing it. And to be fair, it wasn't that great of a movie. It was a solid, it was a okay Star Wars movie, because you gotta separate these two things. You know, you look at movies like, what did I say? Like Logan in my past video. Logan's not a great superhero movie because he basically gets everyone killed that he meets. You know, the black family just died out of nowhere. But it's a good movie. And that's how you look at Star Wars movies. It's a good movie, it's also a good Star Wars movie. And The Force Awakens, it's like, it's an okay Star Wars movie, but it's not really a good movie. It's something like on the lines where it's really not that great, but it's really not that bad either. And so I don't understand why people bash it so much. But then again, people don't understand why I bash the prequels so much as well. So you have to open it to your interpretation. But I do feel like The Force Awakens will eventually become exactly like the Star Wars prequels, where it's like, wow, that movie is actually pretty shit because it's an exact copy of A New Hope, and a lot of it didn't make sense. I mean, The Force Awakens had a lot of missed potential that it was just kind of sad. And actually, I'm going to make a video about that, talking about that, the missed potential that movie had itself. And so, The Force Awakens isn't exactly like the prequels, but it has the same aftermath of it. It is the exact same position that the prequels have of, over time, people start going, wow, that really wasn't good. You know, you look at the movie, what's that movie back when? Pulp Fiction. At the time that movie came out, I believe in the 80s or 70s, it was a really good movie because of how it switched between future, past, present stuff that was happening in the same, like, timeline, but it was just switching through stuff like that, and it was really good. But now you watch it, I watched it about a month ago, and I was like, it's really not that good to me. Like, I've seen it before, and I was like, wow, this is a solid movie, but I thought of it as, what would I see it as back in 1980? But now that you watch it, you're kind of like, it's really not that good. But that's just how movies are. Over time, they lose their impact because of the time frame they were released in. And some people can say that's going to happen to the original trilogy. I highly doubt that because it's yet to happen, honestly. But The Force Awakens has kind of had that backlash over time. It's been out for over a year now, and it's kind of like, well, really not that good of a movie if you come to think about it. And the same thing happened with the prequels. However, I will make the case that The Force Awakens might make somewhat of a, you could call, comeback like the prequels did, because now people are saying that, oh, the prequels are great. And the reason they're saying that is because they grew up with the prequels. People my age, you know, 18, 17, 16, whatever, you know, even people in their 20s are like, but the prequels aren't that bad. And why aren't they bad? Well, because I grew up with them, you know, and it's Star Wars. It's stuff like that where it's like, if you grow up with something, you're going to basically enjoy it and love it. However, that's not the case for everything, because I enjoyed Kangaroo Jack. That was like my favorite movie as a kid when I was 5, and now that I look at it, I'm like, that is a horrible piece of shit of a movie. So it's stuff like that where you gotta kind of, you know, put your grown-up bias aside and be like, alright, you gotta analyze it for what it really is. So, but what do you think? Do you think The Force Awakens is in the exact same position that the prequels were, or do you think it's a completely different pile of shit compared to the prequels? Or do you think the prequels are actually fine and The Force Awakens is shit and Star Wars Only is a piece of shit? So, comment your thoughts below. I'm Star Wars Only. I will see y'all next time. May the Force be with you, always.